now this titan of industry is all of a sudden in charge of no one but the dog, their car, and they thought their spouse. Their biggest concern is they have a loss of identity. And to all of a sudden not have that identity any longer can be devastating. And in some cases, that also leads to the dark side of retirement, which is alcoholism, drug abuse, etc. What they're searching for is their authenticity. What they're searching for is this new purpose. What it's really all about is you want to do something, not that you can do, but that you want to do. The ones who hang in there, the ones who really are true to what they think their true purpose and meaning is, become very, very happy and fulfilled people.
3, 2, 1, liftoff. We have a liftoff. Tower cleared.
It is stunning how much I continue to hear over and over again about people who go into traditional retirement, figuring that it is going to be idyllic and wonderful, but after a year or two find out that it is anything but, that they're miserable, that they're unhappy, and they have some serious problems. This is especially true for people who have led very full, active, ambitious, and successful professional lives. They've been doing it for decades, and then suddenly it's like a car crash. You've been going 70 miles an hour and you go to zero. There are consequences. Well, Bob Foley has some insights into this and some solutions. He is a former top executive himself, and he is now coaching other top executives, ideally before they retire, but even a year or two after they retire, on how to turn this around and not only avoid the problems, but how to make the decades ahead some of their most successful and fulfilling ever. Let's start with what he's hearing from some of his clients.
Their biggest concern is they have a loss of identity. Their work identity is something that they basically shrouded their whole life around for more than 40 years. And to all of a sudden not have that identity any longer can be devastating. And many of these people have prepared for retirement financially, but when it comes to the lifestyle part of retirement, they haven't prepared for that at all. Now, they go out and they go through what's called the retirement honeymoon, and they and their spouse go and travel and get their bucket list out, and they cross everything off, and about 6 months later, they return home, and now this titan of industry is all of a sudden in charge of no one but the dog, their car, and they thought their spouse. But what happens with the spouse is that they have already set up a parallel life to the executives out of need, because the executive was always traveling so much that when the executive intersects with them and wants them to be able to go out to lunch or to attend a show or whatever, and the spouse says, no, I'm sorry, I can't, because that's my day or night for book club. The executive gets very turned off by that because they're used to getting their way. And many times what happens is alienation sets in, and the executive feels very, very alone. And in some cases, that also leads to the dark side of retirement, which is alcoholism, drug abuse, etc. So that pretty much gives you the whole horizon when it comes to retirement.
So let's break those down a little bit. And obviously, in this interview, there's going to be some hope and some ideas and perspective on how to either avoid this or get into it. But first of all, let's talk about that loss of identity. So especially when they're outside of that honeymoon, yeah, what is it like for them? How do they express themselves to you in terms of what they're going through?
Well, what happens is they go home and they get on the internet, and they what they find is a lot of their work colleagues now start to drift away. So the conversations that they were used to having and their connections with their work colleagues now start to break down. So what they have to start doing is they have to start to put together and create a new social circle. And this social circle is the thing that through this transition will give them the support that they need in order to be able to make the transition. Now, a retirement coach is the best person to gravitate towards, because they will coach them in how they put this social circle together. On the other side, with the spouse, what starts to happen is because the executive is used to being able to get their way and direct, etc., they just figure the spouse will do whatever they want them to do. But what they find is that the spouse has already set up a parallel life. And because of that, what starts to happen is alienation sets in. At first, they go through what's called the retirement honeymoon. And this honeymoon is a period of time where they get their bucket list out and they check it all off. And then all of a sudden, the spouse finds themselves at home again. Now, once they're home and once they're kind of alienated, what they do is they kind of go on the internet, they take a look around, but they have a real craving and need for social interaction. So what many of them do is go out to lunch alone. And they usually end up at their local tavern because that's always kind of a warm place. And what starts to happen is the bartender at the tavern starts to become their almost therapist. And that's very dangerous because the bartender is there to do one thing, and that's to sell drinks. And then the person has several drinks and goes home, falls asleep. The spouse returns, wakes the person up and says, "What did you do today?" And the reply is, "Not much." And then, of course, the spouse then gets, the spouse isn't happy with that. So what starts to happen is the relationship starts to suffer. So that's, again, when a retirement coach can be very helpful because the retirement coach can bring both parties in and start to get them talking with each other, not from a therapeutic standpoint, but simply from the standpoint of talking to each other about what their pain points are.
And it really seems to boil down to the fact that now this former executive or high achiever has to find an entirely new purpose in life because it's almost like being in this, intense, accomplishment-ridden existence, and then all of a sudden it's silence.
Exactly. What they're searching for is their authenticity. What they're searching for is this new purpose. And what this new purpose really is, it's their legacy. And they've never thought about that. Their legacy up until that point was either achieving certain levels of promotion or achieving certain levels of wealth. They've done that. So now what's the big thing? Well, the big thing is that they have to shift from wealth to health. And that's a big shift. And the reason why health is so important to shift to is you can have all the money in the world, but you can't take it with you. The other side of it is when you shift from wealth to health, that's a great way to build new social circles. So when you join a fitness club or a health club, or you get a trainer, they'll introduce you to other people with similar needs and desires. And what starts to happen is you start to become part of this health club community. And this is a way that you can start to make your relationships, your new relationships, with people that you have something in common with.
So let's say, okay, I'm focusing on my health. Good thing. I'm straightening things out with my relationship and I'm getting some new social friends. For me personally, as well as just everything that I've been learning in this overall situation, that's still not enough. In other words, what is my purpose? And especially, well, in my case of the careers that I've had where it's based on accomplishment, it's based on pursuing something and achieving something. In other words, purpose, something to drive me. That still seems to be missing. Is that important for many of these executives and high achievers?
It's the most important because this is the way that they attain their legacy. They may not even have an idea at first of what they want this achievement or attainment or this new life to be. And this is where the coach can be very, very helpful because what they'll do is put them through an assessment process. And during this assessment process, what will happen is things that they never thought of will appear and emerge. And what finally happens through this process is they break it down into about 2 or 3 different general areas that appeals to them. So does going and becoming part of the leadership of a not-for-profit appeal to them? Or does starting their own business appeal? Therefore they'll go and they'll speak with business brokers who are selling businesses, or franchise coaches who are helping to sell franchises, or possibly forming partnerships with other like-minded people that are trying to do basically the same thing. And the person's strength is the other person's weakness, and et cetera, et cetera. So what starts to happen is so many new doors open up. The problem is many of these people become very frustrated with it because it takes time to put this all together. See, they're used to a world where everything around them is done for. They don't even have to think about certain things. When you have to start thinking about putting together your legal agreement, start putting together your marketing plan, start putting together your social media programming, start putting together whatever your process is, and putting it down and getting it to a point where it works. All these things takes time. It can take up to 18 to 24 months for this to happen. And that frustrates the former executive very, very much. But the ones who hang in there, the ones who really are true to what they think their true purpose and meaning is, become very, very happy and fulfilled people. And this new purpose is sustained, and this new purpose then becomes something that they can have for a good 10 to 15 years and feel very good about it.
Yeah, both a statement and a question. I mean, you hit on something that I've been hearing more and more since I've been in this space, and quite frankly even applied to me. And that is that, you know, I hear, well, a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed John Tarnoff, who wrote Boomer Reinvention, How to Have a Successful Career After 50. His number one thing, self-assessment. I hear from Elena Love, who has the passion profiler that she developed with the University of Michigan to identify the archetypes, the keys in you that drive you. And I could go on and on and on. And the same is even true with me, with this endeavor, that especially for those of us that are high achievers and have had successes, doesn't necessarily mean that we are really tied into what we really want to do and what we really like to do and what is meaningful to us. That's my statement. You tell me if you think that's accurate.
It's very accurate, because what it's really all about is you want to do something, not that you can do, but that you want to do. See, it's the can that we've been doing most of our corporate lives. It's the want to do that we seek. As a matter of fact, when you're sitting there in your corporate job, you're saying to yourself, but this is what I really want to do, but I can't because of all these other things that I'm responsible for. And this is the sole way that I can make the money to pay for all the things that go on during this period of time when I have to provide for my family, for whatever. And it's something that people really wrestle with, because, see, it's easy if you do something that you have done before because you're familiar with it. And this whole new endeavor is something that can be very exciting and terrifying all at the same time. And that's why the coach is very important, because they get you past the fear, and then they get you towards this whole idea about embracing this new life. And it's the embracing of the new life that really leads to fulfillment. And as you're going through all the steps to embrace the new life, again, frustration kind of comes in. But what the coach does is kind of let the air out of the balloon slowly so that you don't crash.
Yeah, and I'm just smiling huge on a couple of things that you say that I'll validate. I've gone through that, and I know so many other people who have gone that have said, wait a minute, I've been doing this and this and this because I can do it, not because I want to.
Right.
So, and by the way, again, with coming to a third person, and especially a trained one to help identify that, you know, I think of Elena Love and again, the passion profiler, where very successful woman in the fashion industry, executive, top of the game, miserable, identified those core things about her. And it was like, oh, this is what I need. This is how I need to exert my talent and ability to be fulfilled and enjoy what I'm doing, create a worthwhile legacy to me, rather than just doing it.
Right. And we're not saying that, if people enjoyed what they did in life before retirement, there's nothing that says that they can't put together a consulting organization or themselves to go out and to consult to the industry that they used to be with. And it's not to say either upon trying to plan their exit from the company that they can't put together some kind of relationship with the company where they'll be available to the company at certain periods of time of year. Or let's say, an executive leaves the company unexpectedly. They can fill in until they have somebody in there permanently. There's a whole raft of things. And this is one of the biggest things that corporate America right now is really missing the boat. This whole idea about let's get rid of all these people with all this experience and wisdom, and let's bring in newer, younger people with fresher ideas. Now, they do have the fresher ideas, and they do have to bring them in because that's the way of the world. But see, what they're doing is as they push out the older, more experienced, they're pushing out a lot of wisdom. And you see, it's that wisdom that when you marry it with the younger generation of people, and if you can get both generations to trust each other and listen to one another, what you'll find is an extremely dynamic workplace, and a workplace like no other. And it will give that dynamic workplace a real competitive edge against the people that they're selling against. And with all of that, what we're starting to see in a number of different places around the country is this is starting to take hold with certain of the Fortune 500. Also, there's an organization known as Wisdom at Work, and it's headed up by a fellow by the name of Chip Conley. And Chip was a hotelier and a very successful hotelier. In fact, he was one of the fathers of the boutique hotel concept and did very, very well. He had about 35 hotels in the greater San Francisco area. He sold the company and was kind of like trying to find something to do. And he got a call one day from the two founders of Airbnb and said, Chip, could you come in and consult to us because we really need your wisdom. We really need to know how we need to position ourselves within the hospitality industry. And what he found when he got in there, he thought he was going to go in and enlighten all these people and be the big leader and stuff like that. What he found was that he was tremendously, he felt tremendously disjointed, that he wasn't as smart as the people he was consulting to, that he didn't understand a lot of the things about their world. The things that he understood about the hospitality business, they valued, but what he valued was all the things that they taught him. And that then inspired him to write Wisdom at Work, and that then has inspired him now to start an actual academy where he'll bring in 12 to 15 different midlife executives and educate them on how best to communicate and to deal with the millennial generation and vice versa.
And I agree with you. I've been hearing more and more often about the downside of brooming out the older workers, bringing in all the young talents. But one very obvious thing is that we were all mentored. You know, we had older people when we were younger who helped both overtly and just by observation and osmosis learn our way. Who's left for them to do it? There's the legacy thing. So by the way, I assume that this does include things like some companies doing a legacy worker thing or phased retirement, or like you mentioned, coming in on a special project or consulting or a few days a week. It seems like there are a multitude of opportunities out there for both HR to consider, but also for the executive or employee to bring up to HR or their leadership, correct?
Well, here's what it comes down to. The smart companies who take a look at their succession plan and see that their succession plan has another piece that they don't have in place, which is this whole idea about senior people taking on other roles that are more consultative for periods of time within the organization. And this becomes something that's accepted within the organization and something that's commonplace. And until we go through this process with a number of different companies, I really don't think that industry in general is going to accept the concept. But here's the big rub. The rub is the baby boomers feel that the millennials are too entitled, that they're trying to push too fast to move up, and they more or less just kind of discount them as people who can absolutely take over businesses. Then the boomer finds themselves outside of the workplace and says to themselves, oh my God, I'm being discriminated against, ageism, I'll have to sue somebody. The fact of the matter is this: the world has changed. The baby boomer has not accumulated the right skills in order to make themselves effective, in order to make themselves necessary to an organization. So my advice to people who feel that way, who are on the outside, this is when you stop, take a look at what you really want to do, and take a look at the skills that you'll need to acquire in order to do that. So you can do things like go back to school. Now, not to go back to school for a 4-year period of time or 2 or 3 year period of time. You don't have to get a master's. You merely go and get a certification. The interesting things about certifications is that most community colleges and 4-year colleges offer these things through their continuing education programming. At the same time, what people over 60 don't understand is many states offer free tuition for anybody over 60 to take a class that isn't sold out. Some of the states offer half tuition. Other states offer that you can take up to 3 courses for free, but you can't matriculate towards a degree. But you can matriculate towards a certification of some kind.
So what you're touching on is very important. Validate my response to this, that in the first place, if you are still employed, it's about keeping up to speed on whatever it is that you need. And even if you are retired, but you want to, in whatever way, shape, or form, be back in the game, making sure that your skills and awareness and, quite frankly, confidence are at that level, correct?
Absolutely. And here's the big thing. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. I mean, when you were 22 years old, fresh out of college and things like that, you thought you'd never get up that mountain. And guess what? 40 years later, you did. And you did very, very well. It's time to start again. But here's the big difference. This time you have experience. This time you have emotional intelligence. And this time you have great wisdom. Use those qualities and channel them in a way that will help you get to your next level.
So in the last few minutes, we've gotten on this track talking about those people who maybe want to parlay in their industry, sector, company, their core skills. Excuse me. What if I'm ready to move on from that into something entirely new, and or through the self-assessment process with a coach, I've identified, oh, wait a minute, this is the itch I've wanted to scratch all my life. Or I've got the big idea that I've kept in the back of my head. How do I go on to something entirely new, and how reasonable is that?
Well, here I'll give you a couple of examples of some clients of mine, okay? I have one client who was in the hotel business, achieved very, very high levels, was very well respected, was in the luxury hotel business. And what he did to transition himself, because he was very dedicated to health and wellness, he ended up as the president of a hospital organization. And that's the way he made his transition from hospitality to healthcare. And that was the thing that he wanted to do when it came to his legacy, is he wanted to bring hospitality skills or higher customer service skills to healthcare. Now, another person was in the hotel business for about 35 years, and he was on the operations side. What he really wanted to do was he wanted to get over on the asset management side. So he put together his own consulting firm. And what I did was with him is we went through LinkedIn, and we found about 500 people he had worked with previously. And he started contacting them one at a time over the phone. and started conversations. And it wasn't a selling conversation. It was simply, hey, John, how you doing? What you've been doing? I haven't talked to you in 5 or 6 years. Tell me about your life. And through those kinds of, through that kind of networking, he has ended up now with 5 good, strong clients in the asset management area. Another person had been in the restaurant business and was very good with his hands and really enjoyed carpentry. So what he did was he went the franchise route, and he bought a franchise that specialized in handyman services. And he's grown that business now to where he has 10 trucks on the road, 15 employees, and he's doing about $2.5 million a year.
All 3 great stories. How realistic is it for an entrepreneurial path for most executives that you're finding?
If you take a look at the International Franchise Association, they kind of break down generationally, percentage-wise, how many people buy franchises from the different generations. For the baby boomer generation, it's about 12%. So it's relatively low because the millennial generation is about 45%. So, and that kind of makes sense, all right? Mm-hmm. But what they're starting to see is that although the baby boomer generation is 12% on the franchise side, that's up from 8% 5 years ago. And what is starting to happen is there's a number of people who are taking a look at this from the standpoint that I need something that's well structured. And when they go out and they look at businesses for sale, these businesses, they're for sale for a reason. And the reason usually is because they're failing. And they don't have good structure. And if it's a business that the person doesn't have a background in, they feel a little uptight about taking the plunge. And that's why sometimes franchising becomes more attractive. And, franchising is kind of like timeshare. Timeshare had people had a bad taste in their mouth for years. Now vacation ownership is a very widely accepted way to take a look at your vacationing. I think we're going to start to see that 12% will grow to 15 and then 18 probably over the next 10 years. And that's all because you have these 10,000 people a day reaching age 665, 35 million again between now and 2030 will reach 65. So just the sheer numbers will start to fill things in.
And what about starting something from scratch? I mean, and some people, and I want to add a caveat to this, maybe not realizing what it takes because you've had a corporate career and knowing that this means you're going to have to bust your ass again.
Yep.
And go through a lot of stress and pressure and failures and pivoting. So how realistic is it where it's like, I want to start this business up?
Well, what usually happens is when the person decides that's what they want to do, they go and they contact friends from the industry naturally. And what starts to happen is people see you as a certain individual. Then when you present yourself as a different kind of individual, that confuses them. And many times what happens is they're not too sure that they want to get involved with you. So so after about 6 or 9 months of that, you do get some assignments, but not enough to sustain. So then you have to face the fact that you have to go out and make new relationships. And you start to get into marketing yourself. Now, an executive many times has never had to market themselves. They've always been working in the business, not on the business. And part of when you're selling yourself in a consulting role is you are the business, you are the brand, and you have to sell yourself. And people get sometimes people get very uptight about that because they've never had to sell themselves, and it doesn't feel comfortable to them. All right. So what you start to learn over time is you have to spend money to make money. But a lot of these people figure they'll just get big consulting contracts and it'll be very easy to do, and they won't have to spend an awful lot of money. So over time, what they find is they have to hire somebody to help them with social media because they have no idea what that's all about. They have to find someone to help them put together a website. Usually it's one and the same person. They have to find that they have to, many times they'll go out and they'll engage with a lead, a company that provides leads to them, or they'll go out and they'll have somebody train them or teach them how to use Sales Navigator, say in LinkedIn. So they'll go through this whole metamorphosis that usually takes almost a year to kind of figure out what they really want to do, kind of figure out how to present themselves to the marketplace correctly. And by the way, they'll probably correct that presentation 4 or 5 times before they get it right. And that's why if you want to go into business for yourself or with a couple others, it's very important that you understand that this is new territory. It's a new frontier. So be wise and seek out a retirement coach that can help guide you towards what you're going to need so nothing surprises you, and so that when they put together their plan, it's a well-informed plan.
So in terms of taking this on, excuse me, the retirement coach, mm-hmm. and or everything that's involved in it, the self-assessment and discovering and finding your options. When is it too late to do that? And when is it early enough to do that? In other words, if I've been retired for a few years and I'm miserable and my wife is ready to kill me, or my husband or partner, or I'm 49 years old, paint that picture for me. Give me some advice.
The optimum time to get involved in starting to plan your new life is a good 3 years before you actually want to take the plunge. And with that, you have the time to be able to engage the people to put together a website, to put together a social media program. You'll become familiar with it. You'll understand it. You may even go to your company and say, I'm going to retire in a year, but I want to bring up my own business here. And it will not conflict with what I'm doing here, but I want you to know that I'm doing that. And this can be all part of your succession plan. And it's something that I have found through my clients when they have done that with their current employer. Their current employer is relieved because now the current employer knows when this person wants to retire, and they can have the time to be able to refill their position. And they also have the time, the individual who's leaving, to share their knowledge with their successor. This is all very, very important. Now, the other side of it is that going through that process, you can make some mistakes during that period of time, and it's not going to be costly in terms of time and money. On the other side of it, if you find yourself in retirement, if you find yourself getting to that point where you're 2 years in and you're feeling down and you're feeling out, no, there's never a bad time to start a new direction. The whole thing is that you have to be totally committed to that new direction. Commitment is the thing that separates really success from failure. The optimum time is about 3 years before you're actually going to leave the company. And that will give you time to go through the assessment process. That will give you time to be able to decide exactly what you want to do. That will give you time to be able to experiment with it if you wish. That'll give you time to basically talk to your spouse about things, to understand what they want out of retirement. That's also a big part of this whole transition, and to talk to your kids about what they will perceive as you will going through this whole retirement thing, because they may be planning on going back to grad school and having mom and dad pay for that too. And all those kinds of things are the things that you can get into during this 3-year period of time. Now, when I say a 3-year period of time, it doesn't take 36 months, but what it will take is a period of time of intense look-see, then some time of pondering, then some time of actually starting to build. And it's very important within that last year of employment, that's when you really start to ramp it up. Now, when does it get to be too late to be able to do some of these things? I can give you a million examples, not a million, but I can give you a few examples of people that have done these things into their 70s and 80s, but those are very unique people. If you wait until you're in your late 60s, that's when things have kind of passed you by. So the best time or the time that you should be getting involved with a retirement coach, if you haven't done that before you retire, is within the first 2 years after you retire.
And that's very often when the honeymoon is either over or it starts getting stale, correct?
It is. And, the funny thing is, many times during that 18-month period, it's the spouse that comes to me and says, can you talk to my spouse? They really need help and direction. Or sometimes it's their kids. I had one friend from college who I was coaching his son with some career with some career counseling, and he called me 6 months later and he said, "Could you do for my dad what you did for me?" So it's very interesting sometimes how things come.
And you and I both attended the Retirement Coaches Association's conference a few weeks ago. And there was a woman who was becoming a retirement coach who is an international airline pilot. She sits in the left seat, and she's pursuing this as her exit, her next thing to do, because she sees so many colleagues who, you're forced to retire by the FAA at age 65. And she said that the wife of a pilot that she knows that retired came to her and said, You've got to help him because he's going to be dead in 2 years, and I'm going to be the one that kills him. So I guess the bottom line here is that minimally 3 years before you plan to retire is the time to start working with the coach, or at least working on your own for those people who are unwilling to do that, to start figuring out what are you going to do beyond that bucket list that empties out very quickly. It's got lots of holes in it. Right. And that at the first signs of, oh my gosh, what have I got myself into? Or I feel like I'm failing at retirement, that you get in touch with a coach and you get that guidance.
Yeah. I mean, basically how it works is you go through an 8 to 10 week process in that year 3. And then and you do that over about a quarter or 4 months. And then you kind of break it down to once a month talking, and talking for about an hour or so. And then in the second year, you do that on a quarterly basis. And then in the third year, you pick it up again and you revisit that 8 to 10 segment process. And then you start to build that business or whatever you're going to do. You start networking, or you start talking to certain people that can help you get into the nonprofit world. Or that's when you start to take your college courses so you can get your certifications. That's when all that stuff starts to take place. That's why if you wait till 2 or 3 years after you retire, you've been out of the game too long mentally. And what starts to happen is you get very easily frustrated. And that's where we see a lot of people push the ejection button.
And I get the emotional trigger right here when you say that too, that all of us that have been in business and you've got to get something done, and now you are under the gun to do it. Oh, we should have started this in August. We're starting this right now. And if you're doing it 3 years ahead of time, you've got the time, you're being smart. If you wait until a couple of years after retirement and things are going south on you, that just adds a lot of pressure.
Oh, and not only pressure, but when you're on your own and you're sitting in that home office, staring at that white wall in front of you, it's very easy to push that ejection button because there's nobody else around to keep you on course. The guardrails are gone. It's all you.
And we know that alcoholism, divorce, drug abuse, depression are spiking, in many ways for these very reasons.
The fastest growing group of people going through divorce are in the 55 plus group.
So Bob, bottom line for you, what ultimately would you like to see? What is your purpose? What is your intent with doing this?
I got involved with retirement coaching for one reason and one reason alone. I saw a tremendous hurt out there within people from my generation. And I went through a very similar thing. It took me 5 years to get to this point, but I'm here now, and I've gone through the journey. And now what I want to do is be able to help my peers be able to navigate these choppy waters so they can get to the safe harbor and really enjoy their retirement years.
What is the best way for people to connect with you?
Best way is through email, and that's bob@legacytransitions.org, or simply call my cell at 973-219-5100. Either way is fine with me.
What Bob is putting forth, and what you hear from so many other people in the BOOMcasts here on ProBoomer and so many of the blogs, is that, well, for some people, traditional retirement is perfect and they thrive in it. And to those people, congratulations, go for it, you've earned it. But at least when you're approaching retirement, it is critical to stop and really think through your future. What are my days going to be like? Not in that first year or two and you get to sleep in, you get to do whatever you want, but what if it's 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 years later? What about my relationship that's been one way for decades and it's now suddenly going to be different? All of these questions seriously need to be considered when you're approaching retirement, and or once you're in retirement and you start having these doubts, that's when it's time to take action. Here on ProBoomer, that's so much of our focus, is to bring awareness to this fact and also to lay out the vast and incredible possibilities that exist out there to have a meaningful, fulfilled, purposeful life and the kind of balanced lifestyle that you want. And also, as boomers did 50, 60 years ago, potentially also make a difference.